When that fixture list comes out in June, July, whenever it is, the West Ham Tottenham one is always the one that kind of does jump out at you, doesn't it? Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it's a huge game for West Ham, not for Tottenham. I'm really tired of that boring cliche cup final stuff. It's a big game for both sides. There's a big rivalry there. It's a London derby. And it's an interesting one this time round where we are this season. Both teams, obviously West Ham in particularly, really underachieving. Tottenham, on the other hand, they are still up there. They always are, but you just get that feeling that they're not really pushing on as a football club. They're on the back of 2 defeats. They've just lost to Leicester City in the Premier League 4-1, which was a result that I don't think many of us expected. And then lost to AC Milan. That loss to Leicester, actually, for Tottenham, it kind of summed up their season for me, where they kind of are. They're just so inconsistent. They just seem, you don't really know what you're getting with Tottenham, considering the fact that a week or so prior, they'd beaten Manchester City and played very well. So you just don't know really what you're getting with Tottenham. Before we talk about the team news and into this one and what we think is going to be happening in terms of lineups and all that stuff, I just want to talk about Tottenham first. So, as I've just said, they're very inconsistent. They're in a poor run of form as well. They're on the back of 2 defeats, as I've said. I don't know really whether that's a good thing or not, because you look at Tottenham and think, are they going to respond with the size of their club, of the expectations they've got there? You would imagine that they need to respond. It's going to be a big game for them. The big bit of news in the week for them was their manager. Antonio Conte is going to be missing from the game. He remained in Italy because he's still recovering from his operation that he had a couple of weeks ago. Again, it's one of those you can't put. Is that going to have a knock-on effect? Possibly, but would it be a positive for them? When he was out previously, they did quite well in his absence. So you do wonder whether that's going to add a little bit for them. In wanting to deliver a result while he's away. I don't know, but whatever it is, he's not going to be there. It's going to be their assistant manager taking charge. I mean, it pains me to say it. Tottenham Hotspur are not a club, obviously, being a West Ham fan, that I look at with admiration. I don't look at it with fondness, really. I don't really like them. But I have to admit, there is a feeling of jealousy a little bit when I look at Tottenham. I think they're such a well-run football club. You look at their stadium. It's a proper football stadium. It's a state-of-the-art football stadium. They almost are like the club. It pains me to say it when I'm being a West Ham fan. I look at it and think, I wish we operated in that way. I wish we were a bit more like them in how they do business. They just seem to be a very well-run football club. You look at their training facilities, like they're top drawer. And as I said, the stadium, they've got top drawer players. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't think they're doing amazingly. They don't really ever seem to push on. You look a few years ago when they got rid of Pochettino, I thought it was a mistake at the time. Didn't really understand the sacking, considering what he'd done for the football club. But they decided to part ways with him. And let's be honest, they haven't really progressed. I think they've really attempted this sort of quick fix, quick fire. Let's bring in a proven winner, and it's not really worked. It didn't really work with Mourinho. I don't really think it's working with Conte, to be honest. Especially with Conte, because I just feel that he offers a style of football that is just not really what you tie into Tottenham Hotspur. Under Pochettino, they had this very fast-paced, attacking style of play, whereas nowadays you look at Spurs and they're just a bit boring. They're not really that exciting to watch. They're not. I've not really, of the games I've watched Tottenham, I've not really been impressed with them. Aside from the City performance, I thought they played pretty well in that game, but they're just a strange side. They play in the way that Conte does like to play, the Italian way. It's a defensive style of football, trying to nick a goal. Much like West Ham do, really. We played sort of counter-attack, really, but they just don't play that sort of fast-flowing football that we all come accustomed to seeing under Pochettino. I actually do believe that when Conte does leave the club, which I do think will happen this summer, I think Pochettino will probably come into that club. That's just my guess. It seems to be him being out of work and also being friends with Levy still. You imagine that's probably going to happen. And obviously they highly rely on Harry Kane. I mean, they've got a high. I mean, he's as much as it pains me to say it, being Tottenham, he is an incredibly good player. There's no two ways about it. Kane is a really remarkable player, and it kind of touches on what I was just saying about. You look at Spurs and sometimes feel a bit like, I wish we did things like that. They've kept Harry Kane all these years. They've not won anything, but they're still keeping him. There's talking now that he's going to sign another deal with Tottenham. We can't keep Rice. He wants to move on, and because we're just not able to offer him. You do sometimes think, if we'd have bought our own stadium, if we'd have done things the way they've done things, had the investments like they had, we might have been able to retain players like that standard, because they'd look around and think this is unbelievable. Whereas when let's be honest, when you look at West Ham's facilities, you look at our stadium really at times, and you think, we cut corners. Our owners cut corners. That's how West Ham operate. We try and do everything on a bit of a cheap budget. We do try our best to cut corners as best we can. We do it with our managerial appointments, don't we? We do it with everything we do. We do try to do everything on I won't say the cheap, but we do try to. Yeah, as I say, we try to take the easy route sometimes without doing the hard yards. And you look at Spurs, and they do the opposite, and it just pays off. You can just see it has, and hence why they're managing to retain these players. As I say, I think they're likely to respond. I think this is going to be a tricky game for West Ham, this Spurs game. They're coming on the back of 2 losses. You imagine, with their manager being away, being absent from his operation, or recovering from his operation, that I'm sensing that there's going to be a response from Tottenham. They're going to, and it's a big game for them as well. They're going to want to win this game. They need to as well, because they want to achieve top four finish. I don't think they're going to get it this season. That's my gut feeling. I just think they're just too inconsistent to get there. There's just teams that are better than them at this season, and I just think they're going to struggle to get it. It's going to be an interesting game. They've actually got a few injuries though, Tottenham. So look at their team. Romero and Højbjerg are back in. They've both been suspended, I think, for their European game in the week. So they're going to be back in the squad. But they are missing some key players. The main one being Benteke. He is, a huge loss to them. Midfielder, obviously I think he ruptured his ACL. So he's out now for the rest of the season. That's a big blow to them. That is a huge loss. He was doing very, very well for Tottenham, and I think that's a big blow. Hugo Lloris, of course, as well. He is out. He's injured as well. Going to be missing for the game. Their captain. I'm not a big fan of his, to be honest. I think he's incredibly inconsistent as a goalkeeper. But still, it's still a captain. It's a big voice. That's going to be a loss to them. I'm just looking here. You've got Bissouma is also out, and also Sessegnon. So they've got a few players that are going to be missing. But let's be honest, Tottenham, for me, they heavily rely on Harry Kane and Son. They're their 2 key players, and they're fit and going to be available. So if they've got those 2 in the side, they can cause us problems. We know that. It's going to be an interesting game. On to West Ham then. We'll talk about team news first of all. We've obviously had the press conference from David Moyes. Lucas Paqueta is out, which we'd known about anyway. I think it would have been a big surprise to anyone if he'd have featured. However, the good news is with Paqueta, which we'll talk about in another video, is that it's not too serious. It looks like he could well be back for the Forest game. So that's fantastic news. It's a shame he's missing Tottenham, but I'm sure we can manage this game without him. We're going to have to. We're going to have a choice. But obviously, the very, very positive news is that Naya Fagerd is likely to be involved. I think he's been in training. And his scan on his groin picked up very little damage. So it looks like he's going to be available for West Ham. They're saying it's 50-50, but I'm leaning towards the fact I think he will be playing. And I think if he is available, he'll be starting, especially in this game. Let's be honest, with the likes of Harry Kane, as I've said about Son and whatnot, you've got Danjuma as well for them. There's going to be some players there that you think we're going to need our best defenders there. And with Kurt Zouma most definitely out, we need him in. So I imagine that if he is available, he'll be playing and starting. That's my guess. Obviously the other big news as well, Gianluca Scamacca. That is it's just typical of the season, isn't it? It's typical that every player that, our big key players all got injuries. We've lost Paqueta for a long period already this season with his collarbone. We've had Scamacca out for weeks with his knee injury. We've had Agurd out for his ankle right at the beginning of the season. We really don't get, Max Cornet's been out, and although he's coming back soon. So it is frustrating. It just frustrates me we have to keep talking about injuries all the time. It's just typical of West Ham, especially with new players and key players. However, Scamacca is back and he is likely to be available for selection. When I say available for selection, I don't think he's going to be playing in terms of starting the match, but Moyes has alluded to the fact he could be available to possibly come off the bench. So that's it. Yeah, to be honest, that's a huge boost. And to be honest with you, that doesn't really bother me. I think Antonio is in very good form, and we know his history with Tottenham. Antonio, he just seems to love to score against them, cause them problems, and I think he'll be relishing this. I really do. The one thing that's really concerning me about this game, and it's something that I think concerns every West Ham fan at the moment, is our bad starts, our slow starts to games. Yes, we've had some positive results recently, but my word, I mean, you look at the Newcastle first minute was shambles. We look like it's almost like the players were picked out of their beds and just thrown onto the pitch and go and play a game of football. They just didn't know where they were, what they were doing. I mean, they had the ball in the net twice in 30, opening 60 seconds. I don't think I've ever seen that before in football. So, and then obviously, of course, the Chelsea game. I mean, I was watching that, watching on in horror in the first sort of 15, 20 minutes. I just couldn't believe how slow we were, just so abject and really struggling to get the grips of the game. It just seems to be that we need things to go wrong before we get into the game. And we just can't afford to keep doing that. This is a must-win game. That's the one thing I think David Moyes has to get right. He just has to make sure that these players are ready, that the game plan is ready, that they don't have to you have to be on the back foot to then start playing. Just go out and be ready. And this is going to be a big game. I'm quietly confident. I'm going to be honest. I'm quietly confident. I do think that West Ham have got a good chance here. I think we're in a decent run of form. 1 defeat in the last 7 in all competitions. I've repeated this a few times now, but it's a fact. I mean, I don't care what people say. We are turning a bit of a corner this season. It does feel that things are start getting better. We look more organised. But this is a tough game. There's no two ways about it. This is a very, very tough game for West Ham. We know that. But I know some Tottenham fans, and speaking to them, there is an element of anxiety when they play West Ham. There is that they don't like playing West Ham. That they know that West Ham raise their game. We do raise our game against Tottenham. It's a London derby. We tend to all of these sort of games, but it's just something a little bit added spice to this game. And I think they have that feeling of, oh God, what they're going to do this time. West Ham do have a knack of showing up and causing issues for them. So I think they'll be a little bit anxious. I do think there'll be a little bit of anxiety with Spurs and their fans. So I think it's one of them games. If West Ham can get at them, if we were to get an early goal there, I think it would rattle them big time. So it's one of them we have to start off on the front foot, definitely, because we can't afford to, be falling behind. Like I've said, we don't want a slow start and suddenly find ourselves behind, because it's going to be very difficult to come back from. But as I say, I'm quietly optimistic. In terms of the preview, then, in terms of what I think is a sort of my prediction. For the match, I've already spoken about this to Martin Allen this week on Patreon. I think that West Ham are going to win this game. I've got a feeling. Now, it's probably going to come and bite me. Probably will come and bite me. I hope it doesn't. But my guess is 2-1 West Ham. Got a feeling. But, you never know. Come on, your hands.